This video is brought to you by Raycon.
It's almost Father's Day, and I've been using the same junky old headphones since the 90s. You remember the ones that were with like the thin metal strip? It was basically just like a wire, and the two ear parts were just like black foam. It was terrible. I've been suffering for decades, so I sure am glad that Arlo gave me a pair of Raycon everyday earbuds for Father's Day. I didn't know what I was missing. These things are amazing. They're super comfy, fitting even my large, grizzled dad ears. And they never fall out, even when I'm headbanging to hard EDM, which is, you know, pretty much all the time. They charge super fast. Quick charging for 10 minutes gives them like 90 minutes of playtime. And using the charging case, I get like 32 hours total. Technology these days is crazy. It boggles the mind. These things have got so many features, you kids don't even know how good you have it. I can use them to take calls super easily. They got multiple sound profiles. I like that. They're sweat-proof, which is really helpful, I tell you. This little case is neat too, and you got wireless charging, so you don't even have to take it off. And active noise cancellation really helps when Arlo's mom is playing my contrabassoon, which she does badly as a way to, like, make fun of me, I guess. I don't know. It's a thing we got. I love her. I'm a boomer. I remember when things were affordable, so I really appreciate how Raycons are about half the price of other premium audio brands. And you can go to buyraycon.com/Arlo or click the link in the description to get 15% off site-wide. All orders come with a 30-day happiness guarantee. So give the father or nurturing father figure in your life the gift of Raycon this Father's Day. And you know what? Now that we're talking, I hope you're all being nice to my boy. I hope you're all saying nice things about him in the comments, okay? He's a good boy. He's a good, sweet boy. We love him.
That's pathetic.
Some Switch games sell good. Some Switch games sell very good. Some Switch games, in fact, have become the best-selling titles in their respective series multiple times over. That is just how good they sold. But in stark contrast, some Switch games sell bad. Which, you know, is kind of surprising. Considering the Switch's install base, you would think that every piece of decent software would sell decently well, at least compared to games on other systems, which shifted a lot fewer units. More people with systems, more overall interest in Nintendo, in theory means more sales for everything. A rising tide raises all boats, right? But I guess the Switch is proof that install base isn't everything. There are many, many variables that factor into the success of each game. You know, the game's quality, its appeal, its marketing, its price, its release timing. You know, then there are people who own multiple Switches. There's another thing to consider. And we've seen time and time again that a lot of sales of Nintendo's own IP come from a core Nintendo audience that buys just about all their systems. It's why the Switch can sell 10 times the units as the Wii U, but Pikmin 4 can't even sell 3 times as many units as Pikmin 3, for example. It's frustrating because sometimes it's like, if a series isn't gonna sell well on this wildly successful system, then when is it? If only 10 times the systems meant 10 times the sales for every game, but alas, that is not how it works. Some games just don't do that well, despite everything. And in this get out of here, you're bumming me out. In this video, I'd like to take a look at the Switch games that sadly did not perform as one might hope. A few things before we begin. Today we're focusing on games that are exclusive to Switch, appearing on no other systems, and that are published by Nintendo. So mainly first party, with a few third party sprinkled in there. We are not covering remakes, remasters, re-releases, etc., as those tend to perform a little less consistently overall and would just muddy the conversation. So only new, original games. We are also only looking at full games that have been released both physically and digitally, so no small download-only games. Some of these are kind of budget games, so small-ish and not quite full price, but still bigger, still more notable releases. Also keep in mind, this is not comprehensive. I have not scraped every corner of the internet for accurate sales numbers. Sales numbers are often very unclear, especially when it comes to games that didn't do so well. Sales are generally measured by the millions, and anything less than that isn't really reported accurately by Nintendo. And even if a game does move more units after launch, they won't update the numbers unless it crosses another million threshold. So basically, some of these figures could be off, could be behind, out of date, or otherwise just wrong for some reason. I've done my best, and I think at the very least, this will be close enough for the sake of conversation. And finally, it's good to remember that we have no idea how much any of these games cost to make. We don't know which games were and weren't profitable, so I'm not suggesting that all of these games were like abysmal failures. Not every game has to sell 1 trillion copies to be seen as a success. Every series is different. So with that said, let's take a look at the 20 Nintendo Switch games that sold the baddest. Let's start with number 20, the top of the bottom. Yeah, it's a little bit of a bummer to see Mario and Luigi Brothership on this list. It sold 1.97 million as of the last time numbers were reported. I'm sure it's gonna coast over that 2 million mark at some point. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I wanted more for this game. I mean, a couple million isn't bad for sure. I want to believe that RPG Mario has so much potential. Super Mario RPG and Thousand Year Door remakes sold really well for remakes, but remakes are always going to sell less than original games. So I was hoping that an original Mario RPG, and then also like the triumphant return of Mario and Luigi as a series, I really wanted it to sell better. Of course, the problem with Brothership is that Nintendo released 3 Mario RPGs for whatever reason, all within the span of 1 year. Brothership came at the end when a lot of people were probably feeling a little bit full of RPG Mario. And then of course the game is pretty flawed, kind of mixed reception that probably stalled sales even more. I just can't help but feel like it could have done so much better. Mario and Luigi really needed a solid win. Maybe Nintendo does consider this a win. I really don't know, but hopefully we will see better in future games. Now for number 19, we've got Big Brain Academy, Brain vs. Brain, which also sold just shy of 2 million units at 1.94 million. Previous games on the DS and the Wii sold 6 million and 3 million respectively, so of course this is a decline. But considering touch games were like a huge craze and now they're really not, I think this is probably not bad at all. And like there was also kind of a big multiplayer focus here that's naturally gonna limit the appeal at least a little bit. So yeah, I'd say about 2 million is probably a success. This game also seems very small. It's basically an eShop title, probably a very, very low budget compared to most other games, so probably plenty profitable. Next at number 18, a game that certainly does not feel like a small, cheap eShop title, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which sold 1.86 million. I will say it again. I hope you fans know how lucky you are. Like, really, you should really appreciate how fortunate you are. Other series from other companies have sold way, way better and been canceled for it. Like any other company would not tolerate sales like this. But of course, Nintendo, they understand that some profit is fine. Not every series has to be the biggest series ever. The fans are happy, the developers get paid, Nintendo gets some money, the library is just better now, so there you go. The weird thing here is that it's just hard for me to imagine that these games make any significant amount of money. Obviously, I have no idea what the actual budgets are. Maybe compared to other AAA games, the budgets are decently small, but like these games are still huge. And they got so much story stuff, so much animation and voice acting and stuff. Are they making any significant amount of money? Or like, I don't know, is Nintendo just kind of fostering and growing the series for later with the hopes that eventually it makes a lot of money? I really, really don't know, but Xenoblade 2 sold 2.44 million, so 3 selling 1.86. That is a good deal less. And that's disappointing, again, because of the install base, because you just want to see the series grow and grow with each title. I don't know if maybe the numbers in the title's a bit of a problem, problem going from 2 to 3. Only a percentage of that audience is gonna move over. You're not gonna get a lot of people starting with 3, even though 3 is probably the best in the series from what I hear. I don't know, whatever. Hopefully the game was still profitable, at least profitable enough to keep the series alive and keep the games coming. Next up, number 17 is Fire Emblem Engage, which sold 1.61 million. The previous game, Three Houses, sold over 4 million, and the 3DS games before that were, responsible for saving the series from the brink of death. So yeah, well under 2 million units is a bit of a shame, and I do have to wonder if it was seen as a success. In fairness, as someone who loved Three Houses, Engage was just less appealing. I probably wouldn't have bought it if I didn't want to do a video on it. I don't know. The gameplay was like really good, but overall, I think it just had a less interesting story and vibe and everything. It's kind of less focused, kind of a weaker identity, and it almost felt unnecessary coming so soon after Three Houses, which was such a big game and warranted so many playthroughs. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying Engage was bad or anything. I just think it had less going for it, and that had an impact on the sales. These games already have smaller budgets, though. They clearly reused a lot of stuff from Three Houses, so maybe it was still profitable. I don't know. Now for number 16, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, The Black Order. A game which I will never stop forgetting exists. Like, Switch has an exclusive Marvel game. An exclusive Marvel game. And it's a sequel to the ones on the GameCube. I don't know, I guess anything Marvel related, I just kind of gloss over. You just kind of assume that it's some multi-platform thing. But yeah, like, this is a legit Nintendo Switch game. And as for the numbers, it's sold 1.5 million. There have been a lot of Marvel games. I really don't know how this compares to most of them. I mean, it's certainly no Spider-Man on PlayStation. Those games are selling like tens of millions. Maybe the much smaller nature of this game means that 1.5 million was plenty. I don't know. Was the game even good? I honestly have no idea. Moving on to number 15, we have Nintendo Labo Toy-Con 1 Variety Kit, which sold 1.42 million units. Out of all the Labo kits, there were 4, the other ones being Robot, Vehicles, and VR. This one, Variety, is the only one to sell over 1 million, which makes sense. It offers the most variety and thus the best value. Labo was a very, very weird experiment. I really honestly have no idea if it ended up being, like, worth doing. Nintendo did say that to them it was a success, so I suppose I should believe them. I don't know, I just imagine it must have taken a heck of a lot of R&D. Like, this really was a big thing to develop. And I can see the potential. We make fun of Labo, but it really was an incredibly cool concept. Actually constructing this stuff, seeing it come to life, it was really cool. And I'm sure Nintendo wanted it to become a big thing. I could see something like this becoming big in, like, classrooms or whatever. It actually really is genius. I think the problem is that it's kind of pricey for what it is. And then, like, really the worst part, you gotta keep all the stuff. You got all this cardboard stuff. It's too nice to throw away. You don't want to throw it away, then you can't use it ever again, but you don't want to keep it around, so yeah. I get it. Really cool idea, but I suppose it's not, like, surprising that it didn't sell better. Next at number 14, we've got Princess Peach Showtime at 1.3 million, and I apologize, but I do have to go on a little rant here. As always, I will say there are plenty of people who love this game, and there's nothing wrong with wanting really simple, approachable experiences like this. Totally valid. I'm trying to look at it objectively, though. I really do think Nintendo just screwed up here. Nintendo games, mainly Mario games, across the board, they are simple enough for younger or less experienced or less able people to get into, but still deep and fun enough for everyone to enjoy. And look at even the simplest Nintendo games aimed at the absolute youngest audiences, and those games still have so much more appeal than Princess Peach Showtime. It was so overly simplistic. And I think that alienated a lot of fans, and I did a review. I enjoyed aspects, mainly like the whole spectacle of it, but like gameplay-wise, it just wasn't really fun for myself and a lot of other. It's not super engaging. And I think a lot of people got scared off by the demo and, of course, the mixed reviews. So it is possible that this game was still profitable. Maybe it made some money, but I think 1.3 million units for this game, it's a failure. This isn't a sports game. This isn't a casual spin-off. This is a full title, given essentially the AAA Nintendo treatment. This came after the Mario movie made $1 billion. This was Peach's moment. This was an opportunity to spin Peach into her own whole parallel video game series. This could have been huge. But I just think Nintendo made the wrong game. Like, forget my own disappointment. Like, really, from a business standpoint, numbers this low, it's just kind of unacceptable. It got beat by Big Brain Academy, for Pete's sake. A AAA Peach game should have been better and done better. But I don't know, whatever. Gotta end the rant sometime. Maybe Nintendo was still happy with it. Maybe they'll make more in the future. I don't know. Moving on, number 13 is Astral Chain, which sold 1.28 million as of the most recent reporting. And as usual at these numbers, I really don't know if Nintendo is happy with the performance. They did secure the rights to the IP after the fact, instead of letting it stay with Platinum Games, so I don't know, maybe that speaks of some confidence. Part of me feels like these numbers seem to be more or less typical for similar third-party developed games, like 1 or 2 million. But then again, Astral Chain, it's a very good game. Like, it's got really decent production values. It doesn't feel like a budget game. It feels decently big. I have no idea how much it costs to develop. Yeah, so I don't know. Considering the scope of the game, it would have been nice if it sold more, you know, especially for fans, people who really loved the game and would love to see a sequel. I'm not personally holding my breath for a sequel at only 1.3 million, but we'll see. Then number 12 is WarioWare Get It Together, which has sold something like 1.27 million. WarioWare has been pretty inconsistent. It's never been a really big seller. The best-selling games were on Wii and DS, you know, again, back at the height of the touch and motion control craze, and even those games only sold a couple million each. So 1.27 million is fine. You know, I mean, that puts it among the better performing games in the series. Still not great. I don't know. Honestly, I really just don't think there's that much of a market for minigame collections anymore. I don't know. At least not at such a high price. I don't think that's just me. I really do think there's just not that much demand for them. I'm sure we would be looking at much better numbers if this were a cheaper eShop game, but whatever. It is what it is. Hopefully Nintendo's happy. Speaking of the Wii and DS motion and touch craze, this next game is Dr. Kawashima's brain training for Nintendo Switch. As I also struggle to remember, Nintendo's got more than one brain-related series, made even more confusing by the fact that this one used to be called Brain Age in the US. Now, technically this game is an honorable mention that doesn't actually fit on the list. It would have been number 11, but I'd say it's not quite fair to judge it because it never released in the US, maybe because of the whole like Brain Age lawsuit thing that happened way super long time ago. I really don't know, but I wrote the blurb for it before I realized that, so I'm going to talk about it anyway. This one sold 1.2 million, like Brain vs. Brain. Perhaps this is a decent number considering the style of game, probably the really, really tiny budget. However, unlike Brain vs. Brain, this one was a dramatic drop in sales compared to previous ones in the series. The two DS games sold 19 million and nearly 15 million. It's absolutely crazy. So yeah, I mean, this one wasn't exactly a runaway, lightning in a bottle success. But again, not being sold in the US probably didn't help. Also, like, being really, like, stylus focused and being bundled with the stylus and thus having kind of a high price, that probably didn't help either. Probably still fine, though. I don't know. They need to just put it on the phones. And you know what? Like, let this one go. At least this one. Don't even worry about the Switch anymore. Just put it on the phone. You're gonna reach such a bigger crowd. Whatever. Then the actual number 11 is Bayonetta 3, which is unfortunately not a tiny budget, could be an eShop game kind of game, which does make its 1.07 million sales pretty darn disappointing. I mean, it's a big action game. These games are really good looking, really impressive visuals, crazy effects and set pieces and stuff. It couldn't have been that cheap to produce, even considering Nintendo's dedication to, you know, fostering smaller series and being okay with smaller successes. I just can't imagine that anyone is super happy with this. Bayonetta 2 sold 1.5 million across Wii U and Switch, so that was already pretty modest, and then this is an even bigger drop. Now, the upside is, apparently it hit that 1 million mark in pretty short time, so it is technically possible that it's sold a pretty good amount since then, and it just hasn't been updated because it hasn't hit the 2 million mark. So maybe it's a better success story than it looks on paper. I don't know. In any case, though, not the best. All right, we're in the top 10 now, or rather the bottom 10. Number 10 is Game Builder Garage, which as of the last reporting earned just a hair fewer sales than Bayonetta did at 1.06 million. And I would say this is a particularly hard case to judge, like whether or not it was a success. It does feel like a smaller title, and obviously its appeal is gonna be fairly limited. Not everyone wants to have this kind of tool for making a game, so I don't know, maybe a million is a wildly successful. But does a game creation tool like this cost a lot to make? Especially if it's not even an open source thing. No one's gonna be making games with it and paying you royalties. It's just kind of a fun little thing to mess around with. I really don't know. I guess we'll see if we get a sequel on Switch too. That'd be pretty cool. Number 9 is next, Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes, which according to reports has sold a nice round 1 million units. And considering Fire Emblem games tend to sell a few million each, a Musou-style spin-off is just naturally going to appeal to a chunk of that audience. And this one is tied directly to the story of 3 houses. So considering all that, I'd say a million is probably pretty good. That's probably about as good as you could possibly expect. Realistically, you could not expect more than that. I do have to wonder how much of a profit it turned. Of course, it's not a huge game, but it's not a tiny game either, so I don't know. Number 8, I'm just gonna cheat and put Fitness Boxing 1 and 2 in the same spot. They both also sold close enough to a million that the reports just say a million. And every time I see these games, they really seem like these very basic Wii-style shovelware kind of games. But no, they're totally published by Nintendo, and I've heard they're decent. So I have to imagine that a million each is probably really good for this kind of game. I really can't imagine they're that expensive to make. All right, so from this point on, we are in murky waters. Games that get fewer than a million sales don't get reported by Nintendo, so we've kind of just gotta piece things together the best we can. The most solid numbers we get come from Famitsu, where they track physical sales in Japan, but for whatever reason, I have been unable to find a database with all the numbers all added together. And usually all we get is articles from the week that a game launched, and that's it. The rest disappears forever. So this is all fairly speculative. Again, I'm doing my best, but I might miss something. Ultimately, none of these games did well. That's the real point. And the actual order, as we try to arrange it, is mostly just for fun. And for games where essentially all we have is the first week of boxed sales in Japan with no other data, I've come up with a system we can use just to get a very vague idea of a game's performance. Here, check my logic. If a game sells most in its first week, let's just imagine that over the course of its life, it will double that number. So if, for example, a game sold 100,000 physical copies in Japan in its first week, we could imagine that it might go on to sell 200,000 copies lifetime. Nintendo themselves say physical games account for about half of their sales, so let's double that number again to factor in digital purchases, bringing our example to 400,000. Then Nintendo also reports that roughly 1/4 of their overall sales come from Japan, so we multiply our number by 4 again, and the worldwide estimate for our example becomes 1.6 million. This is not going to be accurate. There are so many variables to consider for each individual game, but when we're working with such limited information, I say this is still a tool that we can use just to get a super basic ballpark. So with all that said, let's look at number 7, which is the first regular old Fire Emblem Warriors. Unfortunately, very little is known about how well this game did. I found one source that said it cracked 1 million, but they had nothing to back that up, and Nintendo themselves just did not report anything. Judging by the numbers for 3 Hopes, I would say that anything close to 1 million would have probably still been pretty good. And this one was a big Fire Emblem crossover, not tied to any one game, so I feel like that probably would have appealed to a good number of fans. And it was a year one Switch title too, so that probably helped. I wouldn't be surprised if this one reached into the upper hundreds of thousands, maybe. Then number 6, Detective Pikachu Returns. Man, this one really slipped under the radar, didn't it? Just really came and went without making much of a splash. That's the funny thing about Pokemon. It's like the most popular thing ever. The main games sell just like tens of millions of units. But the spin-offs, for whatever reason, really just don't reach the same market like you would expect. And it seems that something about Detective Pikachu just makes it less appealing to general audiences. I'm getting conflicting info here. Some sources say 137,000, not quite sure where they're getting at, but then one source says it sold, quote, over 100K in Japan, which would definitely suggest much higher worldwide numbers. I don't know. Whatever the case, I think at least a few 100,000 is like a safe bet, which again is surprising for Pokemon. I would expect anything with Pokemon branded on it to sell millions at least. But hey, I mean, they can afford to take a hit sometimes, huh? Number 5 then is WarioWare Move It. And I mean, I don't want to offend any Wario fans, but we're really getting into the losers here. Get It Together was a modest success, but I don't know if we can say the same for Move It. It's already a niche series. It's already hard for most people to pay that much money, again, for mini-game collections. And then at least Get It Together was like a new spin on WarioWare, whereas this was like a Wii-style motion-controlled it seems like such a relic of the past. It's an idea that was already tired when the Switch was new, so this game coming this late in the generation, it just kind of feels weird that it exists, honestly. Like, it's fun, I played the game, it's fun for what it is. It just doesn't really have a lot of appeal. And that is very much reflected in the numbers. The only piece of info I could dredge up is that it sold 29,000 physical copies in Japan at launch, which makes it the second worst selling game in the series, second only to the Wii U one, and that 29,000 is less than half the sales of Get It Together. Well, I mean, we can use that. If we assume that it got less than half the sales of Get It Together overall, then we can imagine maybe it moved 500,000 units total. Applying the quadraloatic formula, we get a similar number, 464,000. So yeah, I don't know, maybe that's a fine ballpark. I mean, yeah, maybe the game was still profitable thanks to its probably very small budget, but I don't know, $500,000 for a well-known Mario-related IP on a system with an astronomical install base. That's rough. I don't know. Again, it's a fun game. I'm glad that like hardcore WarioWare fans got a brand new one, but business-wise, it feels like a misfire. And then it goes without saying, Nintendo could be doing so much more with Wario, but that's a whole conversation for another day. Now let's look at number 4, Endless Ocean Luminous. The numbers here are almost identical to WarioWare. It sold an abysmal 28,000 physical copies in Japan. Then after that point, there is zero information that I can find. However, by running the numbers through our advanced logarithm, we get 448,000, which I guess isn't terrible, but considering the game was so poorly received, I would not be surprised if like negative word of mouth robbed this game of any potential legs. A few 100,000 isn't out of the question, but I would put it well under that 500,000 mark if I had to guess. And of course, it's such a shame because obviously so many people were really looking forward to an Endless Ocean revival, and this one just plain did not work out. It's a reminder that sometimes games just end up bad. And they fail because of it. And now all those fans have to just sit with the frustration of knowing that now they're probably never gonna get another sequel, even though it probably would have done better if it was, you know, a good game. You just gotta hope that someone in charge understands that when you make a bad game, it sells poorly and maybe gives it another shot down the line. I don't know, I've got my fingers crossed for all of you. Then number 3 is Famicom Detective Club, Emio, The Smiling Man. The bad news is, yes, this is definitely one of the worst selling games on Switch. First week boxed sales in Japan were only 25K, which some simple Arlo arithmetic tells us adds up to a $400,000 figure. Even that might be on the high end. I could see the series doing better in Japan, but I don't know, that's pure speculation. Obviously, the big issue here is that you've got a visual novel, which is a fairly niche genre, but it's also a very well-explored genre with a lot of titles, and, you know, most indie offerings are a fraction of the price. I think it's just a hard sell for most people. Like, I would love to play the game. It looks really good. I just can't even almost justify spending that much, especially considering you're probably looking at pretty darn poor replay value. So yeah, the game probably didn't sell that many units. The good news is, however, that I would not be surprised if this was the single cheapest Switch game to produce. I mean, just looking at what the game is, I have to imagine the budget was probably microscopic compared to just about any other game. So I would say there is a fine chance that this game was still plenty profitable. For all we know, it absolutely did well enough to warrant sequels down the line. Maybe they're working on the sequel right now. Who knows? So that's nice. That makes me feel good. I mean, hey, you can come in nearly last and still be a winner. It's all about your attitude, isn't it? It's all about perspective. So now we come to number 2, which isn't quite number 1. It's not quite the absolute worst-selling game, but it is the worst-selling first-party Nintendo Switch game. And it is, you might already know, and if not, you'd probably have a pretty good guess if you thought about it long enough. It's Everybody 1-2 Switch. Remember that game? That was a thing for a second. As I've made clear, I think 1-2 Switch was already kind of a tired concept, but it still sold okay. But I'm kind of convinced that it probably just sold okay because it was a launch title, and when a system first launches, people are way more likely to buy the games that are on offer because they just want something to play. I could be wrong, but again, I don't see a demand for this kind of game. So even a basic sequel probably wouldn't have done that well compared to the first one. But then with this game, before it was even announced, there were these rumors about it, and we all heard about how, like, it was being tested internally, and even internally, everyone who touched it said it stunk. That was the first thing we heard about this game, was that it was bad and no one wanted to play it. And I thought that meant it was probably gonna get canceled. But apparently not. They spent years still working on it. Years later, it came out, and I don't know if anybody cared. And hey, look, maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe it's a fine game. I don't know. Like, I want to give credit where credit's due. Doing like a Jackbox mass multiplayer kind of thing. It's laudable, opening it up to so many players, letting people use their smartphones instead of just their Switches. That's forward thinking. It's not a bad move. The game has its potential. I don't know. There's just something about it that's hard to care about. I don't know. Like, I told this story already, but like Nintendo Live they had their big show at PAX one year, and right when you walk in the room, they had a big thing for Everybody 1-2 Switch, and they had people there, and they were doing a really good job trying to pull in a crowd and get everybody playing together, like trying really hard to hype it up. And it looked like they were all having fun, but I don't know, for the most part, really nobody wanted to play it. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it still sold well enough for what it is. I really have no idea, but it came and it went, and we have almost no data here. In fact, I have no actual numbers. The only thing I have is that apparently, for some reason, there was like a random week, like a single week in Australia specifically, where it was at the top of the charts. No one even knows why. It wasn't even like a meme or something. I've seen people theorize that it's because Nintendo just like sold their overstock for cheap to retailers, which like technically made it a good selling game for that. I don't know. As I said, the exact order of these last items is a little bit up in the air, but I think we can probably safely assume that Everybody 1-2 Switch was the worst selling first-party Nintendo title on Switch. Which leads us to what seems to be, if I have to assume, the absolute worst-selling Switch game. Number 1 is Bayonetta Origins, Cereza and the Lost Demon. I do not wish to disparage Bayonetta or its fans. Bayonetta is not my thing, but it does seem to be, of pretty high quality, but the fact of the matter is that the games simply don't sell well. As I said earlier, it is hard for me to imagine that any of them have made much money. And a spin-off of a series with a completely different style is already automatically going to sell significantly less. You'll get like a percentage of the pre-existing fans without pulling in many outside people. And you know, I don't doubt that this game is good. Let's make that clear. It looks interesting in ways. I like the art style, for instance, but it really does look and feel like it has a much lower budget. So this was a low-budget spin-off of an already niche series, and it was sold for full price. And I don't know, if you need proof that Nintendo likes to support smaller, fan-pleasing projects without necessarily making a lot of money, this is it right here. Maybe they really did expect more sales somehow, but I don't know, I feel like the game performed pretty much exactly as well as anyone could realistically expect. Yeah, the first week boxed sales in Japan, 6,500. 6,500. Yeah, there are games, that have literally sold 1,000 times the copies in the same time frame. And even with the Arlo Joker that adds a 2x, 2x, and 4x multiplier, we get 104,000, just barely cracking 100K. I mean, kind of goes without saying, this really should have been a budget game. Maybe even just an eShop game, but even if they were gonna make it a full thing, $40, maybe 50, at least like 50. Can you at least bring down the price a tiny bit? But I don't know, I ain't no businessman. Whatever the case, while we don't have solid numbers, I think we can be reasonably confident that Bayonetta Origins is the worst-selling Nintendo-published Switch exclusive game. Though I do want to give honorable mention to Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Torna the Golden Country. It's a piece of content for Xenoblade 2, so it's like DLC and it functions like DLC, but it's also sold as a standalone piece of software, which kind of makes it its own game. And it's like $40, so it meets the criteria for this list. This is another case where we've got next to no data. I've seen some estimates as high as a couple 100,000, some as low as tens of thousands. It is DLC, sort of, so it's naturally gonna sell less than the base game. Though, if Xenoblade 2 sold 2.44 million, I feel like a pretty good percentage of those people would have picked up Torna. Like why wouldn't you? You're playing Xenoblade, you're enjoying Xenoblade, you want more Xenoblade, why would you not purchase it? So if I had to guess, hundreds of thousands makes more sense than tens of thousands. Ultimately, we do not know, but I thought I would mention it because. So there you have it. Those are the Nintendo Switch games that sold the most bad. Now please head down to the comments and let us know. Have any of the sales figures of these games disappointed you personally? Or perhaps are you just like me and all you can think about is how glad you are that Pikmin is not on this list? Oh, thank you.